Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbarry, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. We discuss many aspects of learning on this show. We've talked about place-based learning, project-based learning, and tonight is about outdoor learning and the benefits of our students learning outdoors. For this, I'm really excited to be joined by Shannon McLeod. Shannon is the owner of Thrive with Outdoor Learning. And Shannon and I came across each other when I read her article on the Teach Better blog about outdoor learning. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you. We always should think about ways to make learning more engaging for students. And I clearly see outdoor learning as a way really to connect students with nature. Shannon, before we really get into the benefits of outdoor learning, could you tell us a little bit about how outdoor learning became an area of interest for you in your teaching practice? I think I understand that you are an elementary school teacher, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I've been teaching elementary school for the past 17 years. I've been teaching in Saskatchewan, and when we're talking about the seasons, we experience all the seasons, especially winter. So I can definitely talk about outdoor education in the winter. However, my own passion for outdoor learning, a combination of many factors that came together at exactly the right time. I was always a bit of an outdoorsy kid, but so was everybody back in the day. I grew up in a safe neighborhood. During the summer, you would just walk down the street and knock on doors and see who was available to play. And then you would usually find us in someone's backyard or in the park down the street by the afternoon. As a family, we went camping a lot. And I loved being able to sleep in a tent. Our family had a tent trailer, but I didn't think that was outdoorsy enough. So when I was about 4 years old, I saved up my money and bought my own teeny tiny little tent. I also went to summer camp growing up. And then one of my favorite jobs was actually working at that summer camp when I was in university. I really enjoyed being totally immersed in nature and then spending the day in the forest, playing games with kids and canoeing or swimming in the lake and being outside all the time. When I went to university, I thought that biology was the way to go. However, about halfway through my biology degree, I realized that I was no good at lab work and a desk job was not what I wanted to do. So I started to look at what other things were happening in my life and where that would lead me. And I started to realize that everything I did involved kids. I taught swimming lessons, I worked at summer camp, I taught piano lessons, I taught Sunday school at church. And so after I finished my biology degree, I went on to finish an education degree. And right out of university, I was lucky enough to get a job. However, like most first and second year teachers, I was spending most of my time just surviving. So after those first couple of years, when the novelty and some of the stress wore off, I started to realize that I was struggling to make it through a school day. After lunch, probably around 2:00 was when I would start to sort of like lose my energy and my enthusiasm. Then I also started to think, if I'm losing my energy and enthusiasm, what's happening to my students who are 5 and 6 at the time? I started to do some experimenting. And that's when I started to think about what sort of energizes me and what gets me going. Being outside, of course. So I started to experiment. We started doing some games outside. Our school did an after lunch reading time. We would take our reading bags outside, and instead of doing our reading in our desks, which was not very fun, we would find a tree and read under a tree. And then eventually we kept building on. And by the end of the spring, we were able to spend entire afternoons outside, depending on the weather, and also depending on sort of everybody's moods. And after that, I started doing my own professional development and a lot of my own research. I did my master's degree in environmental education and then started to become an advocate for outdoor learning in our school, which led to a bit of a position change for me. I eventually became a half-time kindergarten teacher and then half-time outdoor ed teacher, which was a position that I made up myself. I was the release time teacher. I provided prep time for all the other teachers in the school, which meant that I got to take all the kids from kindergarten to grade 8 outside a couple times a week at least. Through that position, I was able to play around with different curriculums, play around with all the different grade levels, see what worked for big kids, what worked for little kids, what was easier to take outside, what wasn't so easy to take outside. But throughout all this, there's one common thread that kept me going. And it was seeing the joy and wonder, even in middle years kids, as they went outside. I was finding that often our students that struggle in the classroom thrived when they were outside, enjoyed the fun and novelty of taking things outside. Sometimes it was even subjects that they'd already covered, things they already knew, but because they were doing something different outside, it was something that was totally fun and totally new and something that they wanted to keep going with. However, as I became more of a leader, I started to realize that student teachers were coming to us and they were saying, our professors tell us we're supposed to take things outside, but we don't know what to do. They didn't tell us what to do outside. And so I tried taking something outside and it just didn't work. So that's why I decided to create my website, Thrive with Outdoor Learning, to provide those resources and activities to get started. Even people that don't consider themselves to be outdoorsy can take things outside.
I love that. And we're definitely going to get into, Shannon, some of the activities on your website because I want listeners to go to your website, access it, and learn from it. Before we do that, and you've already touched on this, in terms of benefit of outdoor learning, being student engagement and a change of environment and not keeping our students chained to their desks all day. But can you go into some of the overall benefits of outdoor learning?
Yes, and there's so many, and it goes really deep into a lot of psychology. I won't go super deep, but I'll touch a bunch of different areas where it benefits. First of all, outdoor learning allows us to take our learning outside and allows us to meet the needs of all of our students. It looks different depending on the age you're teaching, your subjects, and your own personal teaching style. For example, when I'm teaching the little kids, we are mostly doing play-based learning, either in the outdoor classroom or in a designated outdoor space. And with older students, we might do more structured coursework, things like in-depth habitat studies or outdoor inspired writing projects. Also, being outside, it's the only way that we are able to truly and holistically grow our students. I find that indoor learning, we grow our students academically. However, outdoor learning allows us to have our students grow physically, social, and emotionally, as well as experience the mental and academic growth that you do experience indoors. I think probably the physical benefits are what most people would think of when they think of outdoor learning. Some of them are obvious. When you're outside, there's just more opportunities to move. We all have that student that just doesn't know how to walk. They have to run or jump or climb everywhere. So when you're outside, that's okay. There's also, because you're moving over uneven ground, kids are just naturally working on balance and core strength. Plus, because you're walking or running or moving to different spaces, kids are just burning off more energy. And then also, one thing that a lot of people don't think of is you're working on your fine motor skills. So as you're delicately picking up a twig or ever so carefully picking up an insect, those are fine motor skills that you just don't get to practice inside. In terms of social emotional learning, a lot of it stems from the increased opportunities for group work. And a lot of it also comes from like the resilience and self-confidence that comes from doing hard things outside. I find that outdoors, there's just natural group problem solving things that happen. We want to move a rock. I can't move it by myself. It's too big. So I need some friends. So that's just natural group work that happens. Also, with a lot of our materials, we don't have enough for everybody. So we naturally have to share materials. And along with using those materials or those tools, so things like binoculars or magnifying glasses, comes a responsibility. Very early in the year, kids learn that if I don't bring that magnifying glass back, and if somebody else doesn't bring the magnifying glass back, now we have less magnifying glasses to use for the next day. Things like that. The natural consequences just kind of naturally happen. Communication is a big one too, that a lot of people don't think about. When you're outside, discussions just naturally happen. Kids are describing things or giving directions, things like that, that just don't happen in an indoor classroom, as well as the relationship building that happens. So kids are building relationships to themselves, to each other, but also to their space. When students do go inside, it's been proven that they have a greater ability to focus. You're also able to actually cover your curriculum outside. You just have to be a little bit more creative. And when you do it, it's in a more authentic and an in-depth way. For our students, especially when they're having a lot going on in their lives, it provides opportunities for stress release. And it also helps to meet some of the sensory needs of our kids. In addition to that, there's also benefits for teachers. So you get all those same benefits as a teacher, but also I found that it really stretches you and it allows you to look at things in new ways. I found that it helped me become very familiar with my curriculum because I had to look at the curriculum and figure out how I'm going to take this outside.
Can I interject there, Shannon?
Yeah.
I think you read my mind because my next question was going to be, this is great. Obviously, the physical benefits are proven, but what do you say to teachers who say, I have to quote unquote get through my curriculum, and I don't know how this is related to math, or I don't know how this is related to English? I think you were going there. So could we talk about that a little bit? When people come to you and say, I don't know how to do my curriculum outside, I need to stay in and get it done. What is your reaction to that?
If you're really struggling, you could have it both ways. You can do a little bit of work outside. You could also bring it back inside, right? But then if you really need to have that focused time to have something written out or you need that concrete evidence, you could bring that back inside after you spent that time outside. Also, if you think about things in a more creative way, there are ways you can take it outside. For example, math, you could do math scavenger hunts, or even just with your math practice, having your one fact on one tree, and then you have to go to another tree and solve another fact. And if you're really creative, you can somehow turn that into an elaborate scavenger hunt if you have a lot of time. But if you want to keep it simple, just have yourself moving around through the natural space, solving the problems. In terms of writing, I've found for myself, when I take writing outside, the work that I get from students is far more creative and far more inspired. They actually have something that they focused on and have decided to write about. And again, you can tailor your writing prompts to focus on outdoor things. I think science is fairly easy. I don't think a lot of people struggle with that one. Social studies, again, you might have to be a little bit creative, but I found by just doing community walks and having, again, a focus for a walk, looking at resource use in our community, we can cover quite a bit.
It's funny you say that because 2 weeks ago, I was in Oklahoma City and they have a monument there that is dedicated to the founding of Oklahoma City, which was basically a land grab. So they have this monument that is basically a series of wagons and horses getting trampled on and people running to stake their claim. And as a former social studies teacher, I loved it because students could look at that and you could do a see, think, wonder. What do you see in this monument? What do you think about what you see? And what you don't see is just as important. And also, what do you see, think, and then what do you wonder about that? So, what questions come up for you as a student in what you are seeing and thinking, and how could you go back and research that? So, that was an example, or could be an example, of how folks in their local communities could find these sites and then combine not just outdoor learning, but place-based learning as well to go hand in hand. It's resonating with me with what you are saying. And then the other thing I didn't think of as much. As a former curriculum director, Shannon, I'm always thinking about the standards and the academics and the unit. But really, if you think about, and yes, obviously it's a no-brainer in science to do that. But if you think about it, when you were giving the example of posting different facts on different trees, really what you are doing is the same group task you might be doing in your classroom. You're just using a wall-less classroom to do those things. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, you could also take it deeper. If you're doing circumference, you could do that using trees. There's all kinds of ways that you can use nature to cover what you're doing. Again, it goes back to building that relationship with your community. You really start to see those things that are in your community and the different sort of ways that you can learn from your community and also from the people in your community too.
One thing, your article talked about outdoor learning in spring.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at outdoor learning in terms of seasons, what are some of the different things you can do in outdoor learning in the different seasons of the year?
If you're starting off in autumn is a great time to study sort of the changes that are happening. If you are in a place like where I live, where our fall is very short, our autumn is very short, We have a longer summer and then a very short autumn, and then winter hits us right away. Smaller window, but looking at things like the leaves changing, that provides great opportunities for art activities as well as science activities. How people are adapting. So, what are people doing with those fall changes? I'm thinking specifically of my kindergarten curriculum right now. We take a walk around, look at the sort of seasons that are happening. So, Halloween's happening in autumn. How do people celebrate those seasons? Celebrate those different holidays, that sort of thing. Then we get into winter. I like using winter and using the snow almost as a teaching tool. Snow is awesome in that you can build with it. Our curriculum in grade 3, we talk about structures. So they build different structures using snow. We've also studied motion using sleds in the winter. So rather than just watching videos and doing worksheets on motion and forces, we were exploring using sleds in the snow. And we were doing that without a hill also, plastic crazy carpets. And the kids were discovering, okay, what makes them move? What makes them not move? What makes it easier to move? What surfaces do they move better on? In terms of like writing, again, looking at those changes, looking at what people are doing and sort of looking at how people are celebrating. We let parents know that we will be exploring in the spring, even if it's wet and muddy. Send your kids with all the gear they need and extra changes of clothes because we'll be out there in the puddles doing full on sensory experiences. But using the seasonal changes and what people are doing and what nature is doing, guide what you're doing. Again, spring provides awesome opportunities for art, and there's so many things.
And again, Shannon, I think you read my playbook because you were mentioning that you do work with families to ensure that they understand what is involved in outdoor learning, that kids might get messy and do need to be prepared with extra clothing. What other aspects of outdoor learning require some planning and thinking?
If you're going to be leaving your schoolyard, ensuring that your site is safe. So doing a site assessment, looking for anything that could be hazardous. When you're doing that, keep in mind the age of your kids too. My little kindergartens are going to do different things than 13-year-old will. When you're looking at things, look at them from the perspective of that, the age group that's going to be using the site. We already talked a little bit about the clothing and gear. We work with a lot of newcomer families, so providing the education on what good winter gear or what good spring gear looks like and where you can find them. We also do have quite an extensive closet of extra stuff. So sometimes kids forget, sometimes they don't have it, providing it for everybody. There's no shame in using it. I also have a bin by my classroom with extra mittens, toques, whatever kids might need. And you might need to look, especially if you're leaving your schoolyard, at your school or your district policies in terms of leaving your space or doing things outside. Make sure you have all the right permissions for what you're doing, and also making sure you have the parent permission as well.
That makes sense to me, Shannon. Now, I see in your bio that you are certified forest educator. What does that mean?
Well, that is a specific type of learning. So, a certified forest school educator or forest school is less curriculum based, more of a child led way of learning. In a lot of European countries, they have forest schools where kids will go. They involve themselves in a risky play or what's considered risky play. So, they'll be allowed to climb trees and they'll be allowed to build fires or play with tools like sharp knives. It's all based on age and releasing the responsibility as kids are able. So it's a little different way of looking at things. I incorporate elements of that into my teaching. However, I'm not solely a forest school teacher right now.
And now, speaking of that, in Canada, is outdoor learning a popular way to teach?
I think it depends on the teachers in the area. A lot of private schools have forest school or nature-based components. I'm teaching at a public school right now that's considered a nature-based school. Everybody from pre-K to grade 8 goes outside all throughout the year, but do it in different ways. We have 2 of those in our city. And within Saskatoon, too, there's a couple of private Montessori type schools that are more nature-based. But it all depends on sort of the area and if there's somebody that's passionate about it.
As you're talking, Shannon, I wasn't thinking of asking this, but I'm getting excited hearing about nature-based programs, forest schools. I think I would have loved to have been in one of those schools. Sadly, I wasn't. What does this do for student behavior and detention suspension referrals? Have you found a connection between outdoor learning and student behavior?
Yes, I've noticed a huge connection. Right after COVID, I had a couple of really tough kindergarten classes. In the classroom, they were unmanageable. However, if we went outside and I gave them enough structured activities outside, they were able to do those activities outside. However, once we came back inside, it was a whole different story, especially in those post COVID days after kids had come back from not being at school for a year or so, and they just didn't know how to be in the classroom. That outdoor space provided them the freedom to be as they needed to be, but also still do our learning that needed to happen. I've also had specific students that I in the classroom really struggled, couldn't handle it, often had a safe space to go to, but when they were outside, they could climb their tree and were happy as a clam sitting in their tree. That was what they would do for a half an hour until it was time to go inside. And there was no issues at all.
I love that. So, given all of your experience, Shannon, if you were giving advice to a school that wanted to adopt a more nature-based curriculum or school culture, what are some of the things that you would recommend to that school to get the program off to a good start?
Usually when people are excited about learning, they want to like dive right in. But the first biggest tip I could give is to start slow. Outdoor learning is going to be new for you. It's going to be new for your students. They may have only been outside for recess. I know of students that they go home, they stay inside. For them, going outside and being expected to learn something while they're outside when they've only been exposed to playing on the playground, it's going to be really difficult. So starting slow with a single activity, maybe only 5 or 10 minutes, is what's going to be best for them and best for you as well. Once we get used to it, you can start to gradually release the responsibility, either expand your area that you go to, expand the time that you're spending outside. Another one that I found, especially when working with younger kids, was to avoid unnecessary transitions. So I found that transition time, that going from your classroom to the boot room to outside, that was when most of my behavior issues would happen. If you can eliminate a transition if possible, so either staying outside a little bit after recess or starting your morning out so everybody meets outside, then you can eliminate some of the classroom management situations that might happen. Another big thing that I found is making sure you have absolutely everything you need, because I found, again, those classroom management things happen when you have to run inside and grab that one thing you forgot, or everybody has to come and wait in the boot room and they're supposed to be quiet and they are not quiet because they just can't do it. Another one is to use the resources you already have. So again, if you're excited, you're going to go out and buy all the stuff, but you don't need to do that. Start small, start with the resources you have, build your toolkit as you go. A lot of stuff you can find at a thrift store or even at a dollar store, but build it as you go. Another huge thing I found was to set your expectations ahead of time. So rather than going outside and expecting your kids to know what to do when they're outside, you need to talk about what outdoor learning is going to look like and what it's going to look like today, because it might be different. If you're going to different spaces, it might look different. You might even have to talk about what it looks like when we're moving to our space. But also, on top of all that, to allow some time for exploration. There's all that structure you got to do, but then also you need to allow some time for the kids to like freely explore outside, so that going outside doesn't become another structured routine. Everything has to be exactly the way you need it to be.
And I'm glad you mentioned this concept of structured versus exploration time, because as you were talking, Shannon, I was also thinking about schools where it would be very difficult to do outdoor learning other than recess. Now, again, I'm not saying we should overly structure recess, but what are your thoughts about using recess time efficaciously, creatively? What are your thoughts on that? Should it be structured at all, or should it be completely free?
For us, for our schools, recess is that time where kids have a break. So long as they're behaving in a way that everybody's safe, I think that's their time. That's kind of their coffee break, their chance to sort of release from the classroom. Outdoor learning is different in that you do have an expectation for learning that's going to happen, whether that's exploring in the space, so freely exploring on their own using tools, perhaps like a magnifying glass, but it's not just playing on the playground. They're two different things.
And you're right. Students do need that break to decompress. We all do as humans. One thing that keeps coming up that I hear is having the resources and bringing the resources with you to go outside. So you have everything in one place to minimize those disruptions. I promised you that we were going to talk about your website and your resources. What are some of the resources that folks are going to find on your website?
I've got everything from early learning all the way up to middle years. I haven't taught high school, so I haven't really delved into the high school area yet. But my focus is mostly on the early learning up to maybe sixth grade with a little bit more middle year stuff thrown in there. But I have a little bit of everything. Math ideas for early years. I have plans to make an upper years one, but I haven't done that one yet. I have early literacy ideas, writing ideas for middle years kids. There's all kinds of different things that you can dive into. If you're just getting started, I have a calendar of 30 outdoor activities that you can do. Most of them are fairly flexible. You can adapt it for your grade level, and it covers the span of everything from art to science to physical education, and that's available to download for free. There's a lot of even resources for creative play, so crafts for creative play, and a little bit on risky play because there is some elements of risk involved in taking kids outside. But doesn't necessarily mean danger. I think that's what a lot of people confuse. So ideas for navigating that risky play.
What's the difference, if I could ask, between risk and a safety issue?
A safety issue would be something that perhaps you know about. Risks are something that could happen. So you go driving, you're taking a risk, something could happen, but you do take precautions to mitigate those risks. So when you're outdoors, things could happen, but as a teacher, you're taking precautions, you're making sure your site is safe. You're teaching your students the boundaries and the expectations. You're doing your best to mitigate the risks. Whereas a danger is something that you know is there. There's a tree branch that's going to fall. You're going to ensure that your kids are not playing around that tree branch unless it's been cut down, sort of thing. Risk is something that it could happen, whereas danger is something you know is there and that you know that you should stay away from.
Shannon, what did we not discuss that you think it's important for listeners to understand about outdoor learning?
It's important to understand that outdoor learning is for everyone. When you're planning your activities, you also need to consider the needs of all your students to make sure that you are, as a teacher, modeling what inclusion looks like. I've had experiences where not everyone can participate because of their abilities, and working creatively with them to figure out how we're going to all do this. Snow especially provides some issues for students that might have difficulty in moving. So finding ways that we can navigate that so that everybody can participate and participate comfortably as well.
How have you dealt with those issues, whether it's a student with mobility issues or health issues? How have you included them in outdoor learning?
I can give a few specific examples. So I've had a couple of students who have used wheelchairs. For them, the biggest hurdle was the snow because their wheelchair was not able to go through the snow. In speaking with their families, we were able to find a sled that we were able to use, and kids would take turns pulling the sled, or I would pull the sled. And that way they were able to access our learning spaces alongside everybody else. I've had students that have had hearing loss, and for them it was just a matter of keeping eyes on them, like making sure that they knew where you were so that you could signal to them, understanding that they wouldn't necessarily hear the whistle signal that everybody else could hear, and maybe having a buddy system for them as well. I've had a student that had diabetes, and for them it was just a matter of making sure we had their medication with us. It just takes a little bit of extra planning and knowing your students. That's a big part of it. As you take them outside, you get to know them better.
How have families responded to your outdoor learning programs?
For the most part, it's very positive. I've had a few families question how the curriculum is covered, but for the most part, it's been very positive. I think a lot of families see the benefit of it and see a difference in their kids, and are usually very supportive of it. The school I'm teaching at now, people actually opt in to go to the programs at our schools. For them, it's a no-brainer. They know what they're getting into. For other schools that I've worked at, it definitely takes a little bit of communication at the front end of things, but usually I have most people converted by the end.
Shannon, where can people find out more information about you and the work you do? I know we talked about the website. We include that in the show notes, but tell us a little bit more.
And if you have specific questions, you can email me at thrivewithoutdoorlearning@gmail.com. Thrive with Outdoor Learning is all one word. You can also find resources available to purchase on Teachers Pay Teachers under Thrive with Outdoor Learning. And also I share other people's ideas all the time on Pinterest. So again, it's Thrive with Outdoor Learning on Pinterest.
And I will, like I said, link to those sites on the show notes. Shannon, thank you very much. This has been an exciting episode, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.